Hello everyone, my name is Hector and this is the video demonstration of my computer networks project. So as many of us know, computers are able to communicate with each other over a network that is established by the internet. For a computer to send a message to another computer, it needs the corresponding IP address of the second device to locate it over the global network of our planet. As most of us also know, computers communicate in numerical language, in contrast to us humans that communicate in natural language. That being said, when processing a web request, the computer needs to translate our natural language request, for example, Facebook.com, into a numerical language format, which would be the corresponding IP address of the Facebook host machine. The DNS or domain name system is a system of servers strategically placed around the globe that are responsible for translating our natural language requests into the corresponding IP addresses. A commonly used analogy for this system is that of the phone book. We keep phone numbers saved with the corresponding owner's name, and whenever we need a number, we search for the name instead. Well, similarly, whenever we need to contact a specific host machine, like the Facebook example I used, we search for the domain name and the DNS returns the machine's IP address. So in this project, we'll be analyzing DNS packets captured using Wireshark software. More specifically, we'll be analyzing our machine's website query and the DNS response for each layer of the layered model to identify the protocols as well as entity IDs. Additionally, we'll be visiting a set of websites to find each response's IP address and then using a tool. In this video, I used ipinfo.io to identify the owner of the IP address, as well as the location of the machine identified by that address. So without further ado, let's begin.
So moving on to the layered model analysis part of the project, I decided to visit the wikipedia.org page, and as we can see here from my Wireshark, we have my computer's request and the response for from the Wikipedia server. To better analyze this information, I made this table over here with the layers, the protocol, and the entity IDs. Each layer information, I got it from Wireshark over here, and as you can see, the physical layer and the data link layer correspond to this entry over here. The next entry, Internet Protocol version 4, corresponds to the network layer, and that will be that layer's protocol. The following entry would be the user datagram protocol, UDP, which would be the corresponding protocol for the transport layer. The final layer would be the domain name system. The final entry would be the domain name system, which would be the DNS and corresponds to the application layer. For security reasons, I opted out my Ethernet number for the physical layer, but that would be the entity ID. For the next layer, the entity ID will be my router's MAC address, and we could find that from the first entry right over here. For the network layer, the identification entry over here will be the entity ID. The transport layer entity ID would be the destination port number, which would be this one right here. And finally, the entity ID for the application layer would be the transaction ID, which would be this entry over here. The following screenshots demonstrate the website URL and the DNS packet for the query and the IP address in the DNS response. As you can see here in the query, we had the DNS packet over here, which would be that whole entry, and the website URL would be over here. And then for the IP address in the DNS response would be over here. And then we move on to the answers part and the address. For the next part of the project, I used Wireshark as well as ipinfo.io website. And basically what I did was capture the DNS packets in Wireshark, and once I got the IP address from the DNS response, I will look up the IP address over here on this website, and it will give me the address location and the address owner. So with that being said, I'll begin the demonstration. Over here we have the IP address location by its coordinates, and as you can see, they are given right here. If one were to copy that or search for that in Google, we would get the exact location, which we could see it's in San Juan, Puerto Rico. For the following exercises, I basically did the same. I kept using Wireshark to get the IP address, and once I got the IP address, I would look it up over here in IP info and would get the address location as well as the owner. I left every single location in coordinates, but as I just showed, we can Google those coordinates and we would get the location. And as for the owner, we could see here that in the organization field, we have University of Puerto Rico, which would be the owner of that IP address.
So that will be all for the video demonstration. In this project, we studied the domain name system and analyzed the layered model of computer networks. More specifically, we learned the basic procedures of the DNS as well as the scale and structure of the network. We also studied the main standards and we used Wireshark software to analyze the layered model. This proved to be a very useful and efficient tool to analyze computer networks. And finally, the key takeaway of this information for me was that basically the entire network, the entire internet, is built on top of the domain name system network. Hence, it is a very important topic to discuss when studying and analyzing computer networks. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day.